My husband and I recently threw a cozy dinner soiree in our little home, a night meant to unveil the secret that I was carrying our first child. We'd been wed for 2 years, and only days earlier had we discovered that a tiny life was blossoming inside me. I've known my husband for 5 vivid years, having first crossed paths with him among college friends, and at 25 we felt our bond deepen immeasurably. I'd just left the grind of a steady job to partner with a dear friend on a fresh venture, a leap we'd both embraced wholeheartedly. He agreed to keep our financial ship steady until our new business broke even, and now, nearly a year later, success seemed to be knocking at our door. In fact, my husband was even mulling over quitting his job to join our venture full-time. With our bank account feeling robust, we believed the time was right for a baby, even if we were still young at heart. Ecstatic at the news of pregnancy, we wasted no time inviting our families over to share in this wonder. I come from a small clan, just my parents and me, and though I lack siblings, I'm tightly knit with my maternal aunt and her lively brood, so they too were on the guest list. In contrast, my husband's side of the family was a tangled, expansive network: his parents, his maternal uncle with his kin, his mom's uncle, and even his maternal grandparents were all expected. He mentioned that his sister couldn't make it because she was too sick, though we all suspected her excuse masked a self-destructive fixation with the bottle, a fate that had plagued her since a messy divorce and a recent job loss, leaving her to wallow with her parents instead of seeking fresh opportunities. I felt a strange relief at her absence. No one needed extra turbulence on such an ecstatic night. Yet fate had other plans, because my mother-in-law was also on the guest list. Though my mother-in-law and I never shared a deep bond, we maintained a courteous truce despite her constant irritations, chiefly her clear favoritism toward her older daughter, the one she'd long been enabling against all reason and my husband's protests. I held my tongue, convinced it wasn't my place to challenge traditions in a family that wasn't mine. Politeness dictated her inclusion, so my husband and I extended our invitation to all his relatives as well. Originally, we'd intended an intimate gathering with just his parents, but once my mother-in-law learned that my aunt and her kin would attend, she insisted, by urging my husband to do things the right way, that additional relatives be invited. Though her meddling robbed us of the cozy celebration we'd envisioned, I bit my tongue to avoid marred excitement just before our joyful announcement. We assembled our guests, and as the moment arrived, just before lunch, the air pulsed with anticipation. We were showered with congratulatory hugs and hearty pats on the back, yet my mother-in-law remained planted in her seat with an odd, unreadable smile. We couldn't decipher its meaning, but we clung to our happiness regardless. After our announcement, when we plated a lunch that everyone praised as a culinary triumph crafted by my husband and me, the atmosphere hummed with compliments, except from her, who had slipped into a heavy, unsettling silence. Mid-conversation, she suddenly interjected with a probing question: were we financially prepared to raise a baby? Her voice carried the chill of caution, warning that children were expensive, urging us to pause before leaping into parenthood. I explained that the business I'd started with my friend was flourishing and that our income comfortably supported a growing family. My husband tried to lighten the mood with a few jokes, and we deftly sidestepped the awkward tension. But she wasn't finished. She pressed on, demanding to know the exact amount I earned each month. Taken aback, I admitted that while I wasn't shy about discussing money in general, a public breakdown of my finances was neither the time nor place. I suggested we talk privately if she was so concerned, hoping to defuse the situation. Then, as if to dredge up old grievances, she recalled an entirely unrelated incident from a couple of weeks prior. 3 weeks ago, she had unexpectedly called me while my husband was out with friends, a rare occurrence, since she only phoned to ask about him. That day, she insisted on meeting, which I assumed might bridge some distance between us. Instead, she launched into a long tirade about her deadbeat daughter, lamenting the hardships of caring for an adult who refused to work, relying on her parents for shelter and sustenance at nearly 30, all the while fueling a destructive drinking habit. She railed about how this behavior gnawed away at her and her husband's savings, leaving her no choice but to endure. I expressed sympathy, nodding as I tried to understand her pain, yet before I could probe further, she abruptly ended the call without so much as a goodbye, leaving me puzzled and quietly disturbed. Later at the party, she resurrected that conversation with ruthless precision. In front of everyone, she demanded to know why, on the very days she'd called, I hadn't offered to help her daughter financially, even though I was secure enough to spare a few dollars. Cornered by her relentless accusations, neither my husband nor I had the words to counter her. She then went on to insist that family first was the only creed we should live by, chiding me for not discussing her demands with my husband or extending help to my sister-in-law. Before I could muster a response, my father-in-law leapt up from the couch, his tone seething with anger as he demanded to know when she had stopped conning our relatives by using their daughter as a pitiful excuse. His rare loss of temper stunned everyone into silence. If he was shouting, something grave had occurred. In the ensuing confusion, my mother-in-law stormed out immediately after his tirade, snapping that she would no longer tolerate his disrespect. Left behind, my father-in-law explained that she had been phoning numerous family members, lamenting her daughter's financial crisis to evoke sympathy and siphon money directly into her daughter's purse, money that was instead used for her own indulgences, like buying drinks, rather than the help her daughter so desperately needed. Her manipulative scam had fooled most, even those at our party, though when she attempted the same ruse on her husband's sister, her deceit was promptly recognized. 3 days before our dinner, a bitter argument had erupted between my father-in-law and my mother-in-law. He had denounced her as disgusting and humiliating for stooping to beg friends and family for money just so she could continue supporting her daughter's addiction, a scam that seemed all the more outrageous given that our in-laws were by no means struggling financially. My father-in-law, still a respected dental surgeon, and her, recently retired from a high-ranking HR role, possessed more than enough savings to fund a reputable rehabilitation center for their daughter. Yet, instead of seeking proper help, she preferred to defraud people to save her own money, all while shielding her daughter from the consequences of her alcoholism. For days before the party, they had attempted to act as if everything was normal, for our sake, but her guilt-tripping ways soon resurfaced, and my father-in-law could no longer tolerate her behavior. He apologized to all the guests for ruining the evening, and soon, everyone left in a somber cloud. In the quiet aftermath, it was just my husband and me, both burning with anger that his mother had been scheming behind our backs. I secretly felt relief that I hadn't fallen for her manipulations by offering money, knowing it would have only fueled her daughter's destructive spiral, a total waste of resources. Determined not to let the bitter night end on a sour note, my husband and I resolved to reclaim a sliver of joy. We grabbed a tub of vanilla ice cream, queued up a movie, and settled in around 10 p.m. As my husband excused himself to brush his teeth, I lingered in the living room, savoring my second helping, waiting patiently for the ice cream to soften into a delicious mess. Then, a sharp knock at the door shattered the quiet. Opening it, I found my mother-in-law standing outside, her eyes blazing with fury. The moment I swung the door open, she erupted into a tirade, screaming that I was to blame for her crumbling marriage, that her husband of more than 3 decades had left her and was now poised to file for divorce, and inexplicably, she pinned every misfortune on me. Meanwhile, my husband, still ensconced in the washroom farther inside, remained unaware of the unfolding storm. I attempted to explain, to say that none of this was my doing, even beginning an apology before her husband's interjection cut me off. But she wasn't interested in reason. Instead, she spat venomously that she wished something unspeakably awful would befall my baby, that only then would I comprehend her own maternal agony. That declaration was the final spark. I lost all control. Clutching only the bowl of melting ice cream, I hurled it straight at her face. The liquid dessert splattered across her features and drenched the front of her dress. I restrained myself from flinging the bowl itself, knowing that might inflict serious harm and lead to a lawsuit. Almost immediately, remorse surged through me as she shrieked as though struck by lightning. My husband rushed out to assess the chaos, swiftly ushering his mother inside and offering her a wet towel and wipes to clean up, while I scrambled to help locate them, despite her furiously hurling the most expletive-laden words imaginable, an overreaction in my eyes. Once her tirade subsided slightly, she snarled a final curse, booked a cab, and stormed off into the night. Only after she had vanished did I attempt to explain the incident further. In a twist I never anticipated, my husband later chuckled, insisting that his mother had undeniably earned every bit of retribution, and that my melting ice cream attack was, in fact, a mild response compared to what any other fiercely emotional woman might have done. Despite his levity, I was left questioning whether I'd truly overstepped, feeling an aching remorse that I couldn't quite shake. I later recounted the episode to my parents, who cautioned that while her words were unforgivable, had I thrown the bowl instead of just the ice cream, the damage could have been far more severe. I remained torn about whether to apologize or if I was justified in my moment of losing control. I don't know if I should apologize to her or not right now, or if I overreacted AITA for throwing ice cream in my mother-in-law's face after she said she wished something terrible would happen to my baby, and maybe then I'd understand what she'd been going through as a mom. I don't know what came over me, but I totally lost it. I didn't have anything in my hands except for the bowl of ice cream, so that's what I threw right at her face. It had mostly melted by then, so it was a cascade of liquid ice cream that drenched her face and the front of her dress. I had enough self-control not to throw the bowl, because that would have seriously injured her, and she probably would have sued me for that. I regretted it almost instantly, for she began screaming as if she'd been struck by a bullet when I launched the ice cream. My husband dashed over, ushered his mother in, and offered her a wet towel and wipes to clean up, while I assisted in finding them, even as she hurled the worst cuss words imaginable, a reaction I considered an overblown display. After she calmed down a bit, she told me to go to hell, booked a cab, and then left. I was only able to explain what had happened after she had departed. My husband actually found the incident rather hilarious. He said that his mom totally deserved it and that I shouldn't have bothered to help her afterward because she definitely didn't deserve it. He insisted that whatever cruel things his mother had said about our unborn child were unforgivable, and that my throwing ice cream was probably an underreaction. Any other more hormonal woman might have hurled the whole bowl at her, so she was lucky it didn't end that way. Even though he's taking it lightly, I'm not sure how I truly feel. I'm not a person who loses control like this, and I feel absolutely terrible about what I did. I spoke to my parents, and while they condemned her vile words, they warned that had I thrown the bowl, it could have caused serious harm. I still don't know if I should apologize to her right now or if I overreacted. Update 1. A week after the catastrophe, I almost reconsidered apologizing to my mother-in-law, even after all the comments on my original post. But late one night, she sent me a video message where she and her daughter, both utterly sloshed, were cursing me out. Their behavior was wild, and the vile, disgusting things they said, even about my not-yet-born baby, dropped to depths I refused to repeat. Their words were so repulsive that, for both my sake and theirs, I won't echo them here. My husband nearly called the police, but I convinced him it wouldn't be worth the escalation, not when I was already juggling the challenges of pregnancy and a demanding job. In the fallout, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law have since struck out on their own, for my father-in-law left the day after the ice cream incident and has been living with his brother ever since. I showed him the video his wife and daughter had sent, intended as a catalyst for divorce, and he broke down, tearfully apologizing on their behalf. It was heartbreaking to see him like that, especially since he'd always been like a father to me. My husband stayed silent, his emotions hidden behind a stoic facade, though I worry he might be shouldering his pain alone. That evening, we visited my father-in-law to finalize divorce details. Although he'd spoken to a few attorneys, we connected him with a trusted friend specializing in divorces and prenups. After over 3 decades of marriage, the divorce is anything but simple, and if my mother-in-law chooses to contest it, things could become even messier. We were determined to ensure he had the best legal advice possible. Update 2. Not long ago, my father-in-law officially filed for divorce, and this week, my mother-in-law has pulled every trick in the book to stop him from leaving. She's even taken refuge at his brother's house, desperately arguing her case in a bid to win him back. Strangely, she reached out to me and apologized, thinking that might somehow bolster her case, but it didn't. I told her plainly that while I could forgive her, I wasn't about to mend her relationship with her husband. His choice was his alone, and I wasn't going to fix something I wasn't a part of. I couldn't believe I had to explain that a second time, as she's been hysterical, apologizing to nearly every family member she borrowed money from, those kind souls who never demanded repayment, now offering to repay them all in hopes of reconciling with my father-in-law. I haven't seen him for a while due to work and doctor appointments, while my husband remains in close contact with his dad, who seems convinced that his decision is final. It turns out there's more to their troubled marriage than just scams and enabling their alcoholic daughter. My father-in-law has only begun to open up about the dark truths after filing for divorce. Knowing what I now do about my mother-in-law, I can't fathom how my father-in-law ever stayed with her for so long. She's long been dishonest with money, amassing debts over the years that she hid from him in the early days of their marriage. Back then, their modest means might have excused her borrowing, but now it's nothing more than pettiness and deceit. On top of that, her overall behavior, taking her husband for granted, refusing to hire help for household chores despite insisting they share the load, leaving him to suffer with his worsening arthritis, and her insistence on infantilizing their grown daughter while propping up her alcoholism instead of sending her to proper rehab, made it impossible for him to continue. Finally, he declared that he'd had enough and craved a life apart from her, a decision I wholeheartedly supported. Update 3. I haven't been online for a few weeks. Work and hospital visits kept me away after a frightening scare when my blood sugar plummeted. I spent several days in and out of the hospital, terrified that complications might jeopardize my pregnancy, but my doctor reassured me it was nothing more than an overreaction to a sudden diet change. Now I'm feeling healthy and strong once again. As for my mother-in-law's saga, the divorce is still churning along, with intense negotiations over assets and property. After more than 30 years of marriage, untangling their finances and dividing their property has become a monumental task. The biggest sticking point is the house they've lived in, a home they bought together within the first year of marriage. My father-in-law's proposal, to sell the house and split the money fairly, seemed reasonable, yet my mother-in-law stubbornly demands it all for herself. Even if she wins, he already has enough money to retire in comfort, while she will be burdened with repaying those she once borrowed from. Unsurprisingly, my husband and I have severed ties with his mother and sister. They've made no effort to reconnect, and given the circumstances and our unwavering support for his father, who has always been closer to him, it's hardly shocking. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that, in a few weeks, we'll finally have good news to share about the divorce, and perhaps, some long-awaited peace in this twisted family drama.